Abdul took a car down to London and poured acid over a mother and two children.
It's quite low to use anecdote instead of figures. Of course there are stories. Do you think...
If they were your children, I don't think you would consider it an anecdote.
This mainstream media journalist just showed liberals are all about compassion until it comes to compassion for British people.
About asylum seekers, well, the thing is they're going to get, once they're here, 75% of them are going to be granted access anyway. So what are we doing locking them up in hotels at vast expense, unhappiness to them and to those all around who live in those areas. It's a very bad idea. Much better to let them get jobs straight away. And if that's an incentive, I don't think so.
Oh my gosh. You could literally see Matt Goodwin's disappointment immediately as soon as she said that. Because 3/4 of them are going to stay anyway, just let them come in and work with no vetting, no processing, just make everybody's life easier. Oh, Lord, please help us.
National Audit Office looked at, as well as looking at the cost of, they also looked at what the pull factors were and said very, very few migrants on the way here have any idea about what the rules are about when they can work, if they can work, are there benefits, what can they draw, what rights do they have. They know nothing at all. So the idea that...
So she's genuinely making the argument that they're not incentivized by being housed at taxpayers' expense. They don't know why they're coming here. They're just jumping on boats from France, which is a safe country, to the UK, with no knowledge of what it's going to be like when they get here. Does that make any logical sense?
You know, fiddling around with certain kinds of punitive ways of treating them when they get here will somehow deter them, or indeed that Rwanda will, I think is just wrong. As for demonizing them, well, you know, that's not particularly helpful either. If you can either deal with them in some way, if you could find a way to send them all back or stop them coming here, fine, but nobody's managed to do that. If you can't do that, then you might as well treat them reasonably well, because they're going to be citizens, they're going to be parents, people who are citizens. They're going to stop being they are going to become us, the way wave after wave of immigrants have for many, many, many generations. They become an us, and then we forget that they were they.
So if we've not been able to deal with illegal immigration so far, then just give up and let them come and mix. And if you just come on a boat and stay here for long enough, no matter where you come from, no matter what your cultural values are, you can just become British, is basically the argument. This is a Guardian journalist, my friends.
Is illegal migration, because what you are setting out, Polly, is a recipe for disaster. What you are saying is that of the 114,000 people who entered Britain illegally over the last 5 years, and we've got maybe about 1 million people in the country illegally currently, is we should not only not provide any deterrent at all for other people to risk their lives by crossing the channel, but we should actually incentivize them to come 100%. Over by giving them jobs and giving them more support through the welfare state and so on. And I actually think that's deeply problematic for several reasons. You know, one is, I'll give you 2 words, Abdul Aazidi. Let's start there. Abdul Aazidi was somebody who entered the country illegally. He applied for asylum twice, was rejected twice. He then committed a serious sexual assault. He then was convicted in the court and then applied for asylum, but a 3rd time, and was this time accepted because a priest signed off on his application. Abdul Aazidi then took a car down to London and poured acid over a mother and 2 children, which, by the way, is why chemical attacks against women in Britain are now at the highest rate across Western democracies.
That Abdul Aazidi was baptized here, got asylum, and then did that. What a way to celebrate your baptism. I remember when I was baptized after I came to Christ, we just went home and had some food. My mum cooked us some food. There was no acid involved.
We have the highest rates of chemical attacks against women in this country in the West. You don't hear that very often, by the way, in The Guardian, but it's true.
Facts.
Why is that?
Facts. And why is it that the feminists on the left, the far left feminists as well, always seem to talk about violence against women and girls, at the same time advocating for open borders, advocating for undocumented males coming from who knows where, who've done God knows what, who think Lord knows what about women. Why do they not seem to have an issue with that? If it's only when it's English men that it's a problem?
Why is that? It's because we're actively incentivizing people to come into this country who do not share our values, who do not want to live according to our ways of life, and who do not respect British law. The security services have said this very openly. They are monitoring daily many of the people who are coming into this country illegally. We need to get serious. We should leave any convention, international convention or court that prevents us from strengthening and securing our own national borders.
Facts. You cannot keep the people you love safe if you don't have control over who comes in and who comes out. Straight facts.
I think it's quite low to use anecdote instead of figures. Of course, there are stories. Do you think
You heard the crowd even respond? That was sickening. How she responded, sickening. Oh my!
Do you think there aren't stories about all sorts of people who commit?
Look at Aaron next to her as well. He's embarrassed. He's embarrassed to be on the same side as her right now.
Crimes, and you take someone who commits a crime and says, "Oh well, that represents all migrants." I mean, it's not the way to conduct this argument. I think we've conducted this argument on a higher level than that, on the whole.
Wow. Did he say that represents every single person coming on the boats? Or is he not just making the point that because you don't know who's coming on the boats, you have no idea how many of them are going to conduct crime and do these horrible things when they come into the country? And the fact that the very first act they've committed is to break the law, you shouldn't trust that they're going to come with virtue and morals and integrate into British culture. That was sickening.
Konstantin, do you want to come in and then we're going to have a break?
And a drink.
Well, I've been sitting very patiently, which is hard for me given how much nonsense has been spoken so far.
Facts.
So,
Facts.
first of all, if they were your children, I don't think you would consider it an anecdote. And yes, nobody would deny that British-born people also commit crime. Yes, that is something that we have to deal with. There is no reason why we should import foreign criminals.
100%. 100%.
Now,
Rhiannon White, yeah? Wayne Broadhurst, Govinda Johal, 3 people that this month, as I'm recording this, in October, lost their lives because they were unalived by illegal migrants. Now, to Polly, these are just anecdotes. But to those families, that's a mum, that's a brother, that's a father. And it's happening across our country. But when you're so wedded to an ideology, these aren't people made in the image of God. They're just unfortunate happenstances. But we need to be welcoming to, these migrants, these asylum seekers. Don't get angry or upset that we're not in control of who comes in when these things happen. This is the mainstream liberal perspective, and it's a perspective that is also permeated through our government that is going to lead to tensions to rise and rise and rise because people do not feel safe in our country.
as for all the other stuff, first of all, Aaron has tried to position this as a debate about Conservatives and, more importantly, the Conservative Party. If this was a debate about the Conservative Party being useless, we'd all be on the same side. This is not a debate about the Conservative Party, and one of the things your positioning of it as a debate about that ignores is the fact that the Labour government started this, as I explained in my opening speech.
Yep.
The Conservatives have then continued it. Now, Polly made the point that, you know, if we remove all the immigrants, terrible things would happen. Nobody was suggesting that we remove all the immigrants. We're talking about the pace the nature and the scale of immigration and the fact that it has been way too high and way too fast. I spent my whole opening speech talking about this. She then talked about the fact how, and both Aaron actually and Polly did this, that boat people who come here legally on small boats
He's going to say boat people.
are a tiny percentage of the total immigrant population. You know why? Because our ridiculous high levels of net migration. That's why. The number of people who came to this country illegally on small boats in 2022 was 45,000 people. That is almost the same number of people who came into this country legally the year that I came into this country. That's the level of illegal immigration we now have. And they talk about how, oh, you can't stop the boats, it's very difficult. I've just come back from Australia. In 2012, they had 17,000 people come into the country illegally by boats. Last year, the number was 74 people.
Wow.
Not 1,000, people.
Those 74 worked hard. I'm not going to lie. If, 74 people managed to get into Australia, they worked that hard to get into Australia, maybe just for effort, you might need to give them stay. I'm joking. No, not a chance. Not a chance. We don't do them things.
You know how? Because in 2013, they elected a government that promised to stop the boats and then did it.
Simple.
And the reason they were able to do it isn't they don't have the same problems with the laws and everything else. They had exactly the same problem. They just had politicians with balls.
Yeah, facts. Facts. I don't know where this idea that in order for you to be morally virtuous, you need to be soft. This is a Christian country. Well, a country founded on Christian ideals. Jesus, who is the moral standard for the Christian, yes, he was kind and compassionate, but he also knew how to flip tables in the temple when people were desecrating his father's house. It must be a nightmare for people like Polly when they come across people like Konstantin Kisin, who is an immigrant himself and speaks about common sense immigration policy. Because it's easy for her to look at Matt Goodwin and say, he's racist, he's vile, he's unkind. But then to talk to somebody who's been through the immigration process, talk about the same things, it's like, I need to find a different angle, because obviously I see the world as a struggle between the oppressed and the oppressor, and white Europeans are the oppressors and everybody else is the oppressed. But Konstantin Kisin doesn't fit that model. And then, God forbid, I sat down and had a conversation with her and explained why we need common sense migration policy, why we need to end illegal immigration. She wouldn't know what to do with it. But it's sad that we live in a world where the color of your skin determines whether a common sense message is received.